We're going to be getting ready to write a pan for Gimmel Tammuz, and I'd like to share some thoughts, some things that the Rebbe and the Rebbe wrote about a pan that we should have in mind when we have to write it. So first of all, it's important to remember a pan we write, a nusach that we don't always write when we go into Yechidus, write Le'erer, Rachmim, Rabim. And it's something that we write when it comes to a Yom Hilula, a very special time before Rosh Hashanah. These are times when we everything is judged before Rosh Hashanah for the year, and we need to have a schus miyuchad for the year. And the same thing is also when it comes to Yom Hilula. So there is a special, as they tell us, a special koyach of the Rebbeim to be made rachmim, or in general during the year when a person needs to have special tefillas, whatever it is. So we go to the Rebbeim, we give him a pan and ask him to be made rachmim. It's a little bit different on the surface, it seems, from a Yechidus. When you go into Yechidus, there's also other things. You ask sometimes a bracha, sometimes you ask for hadracha, you look for guidance. You look for guidance in whether it's for bigger chassidim in Avodas Hashem, or for many other things for most of us, for things to do with our lives, things to do with our shlichus, things to do with our health. We ask for these things. We don't know we have sveikas, what to do, and we ask the Rebbe. But the truth is that even when we go to the oil or even in a pan, these things are also included. As we know, that the Rebbe said that when you go even to the oil, he's talking about the Friedrich Rebbe, that you can ask anything, and the Rebbe, the Rebbe finds a way to answer. So much of the way that we prepare ourselves to approach going into Yechidus is very similar to the way we prepare ourselves when we have to write a pan. There's a very interesting episode about this I'd like to share with you, and it's printed my Zayda, Vachom, that's Rabbi Jacobson. He describes in his book, that's Zichron Yisrael, so he writes there about in Tafresh Pei, when he went to visit, the end of the month of Adar, he went to visit the Friedrich Rebbe in Leningrad, and he describes the way that at that time he saw the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin had come. The Rebbe came to meet the Rebbetzin then, and he was there in one of the evenings, and the Rebbe came there. The Rebbe writes that he went into Yechidus with the Friedrich Rebbe, and it was on the Thursday night, and it was the week before Beis Nisan, and the Friedrich Rebbe tells him that he wants to make him a shaliach. The Friedrich Rebbe says, as I said, he wants him to be a shaliach, to go to the stuff, to the oil of the Rebbe Rashab, and he gives him pidyanos that he wants him to read there. It's interesting. He tells him like this, reading from there. He says that you should he gave him a package of first of all, give him a package of pidyanos that people wrote to the Friedrich Rebbe, and he told him to take the whole package to the oil of the Rebbe Nishmas Seiden. Just like, you remember, the Rebbe used to take a peklach of tzedlach people wrote to the Rebbe took it to the oil of the Friedrich Rebbe. The Friedrich Rebbe wanted to send this to the oil of the Rebbe Rashab. So he gives him a big package, and then he gives him also a pan that he himself wrote. The Friedrich Rebbe wrote about himself. He says, as far as the peklach goes with all the pidyanos, don't just put it down. Doesn't have to read anything. Just put it down in the oil. But as far as his own pidyon, he asked the Zayda to read it, but he tells him that he's only allowed to read it one time at the oil, and not before that, and not after that, not to make any copies of it, not to show it to anybody. And then he says, no heter b'olam to be able to do it. So my Zayda only read it that time at the oil of the Rebbe Rashab. He read it very slowly. He doesn't remember all the details, but he does remember that the Friedrich Rebbe asked about Inyanim to do with his situation, his position as a Rebbe, and also about Klal Yisrael. And he also asked about Anashim Pratim, and he wrote their names. Anyway, later he says like this, that before he left Yechidus, so the Friedrich Rebbe told him like this, Yisrael, Du weißt, wie zu reden zum Taten. And so he you know how to speak to my father, to the Rebbe Rashab. And so my Seder was Tumult. And so the Frierdiker Rebbe continued and said like this: Zum Taten darf man reden wie Yechidus. You speak to my father the way you would speak at Yechidus. Du bist doch gewähnt bei dem Taten of Yechidus. You were in Yechidus. So you know, in other words, you know how one should speak to the Rebbe and Yechidus. Sollst du sagen, say as follows: Rebbe, ich bin a Shliach von our Sohn von der Rebbetzin. Rebbe, I am a Shliach of your son, which was the Frierdiker Rebbe, and from the Rebbetzin, sie haben mir gemacht für a Shliach. They made me a Shliach. And then, after you finish saying reading the minor, then you say the minor lesson. Okay. And my Seder writes also that Reb Zalman Duchman, Alav Shalom, was then in Leningrad, and he said that the Frierdiker Rebbe had said, he remembered that he said that when you'll be in the oil in the morning, it'll be at the same time I daven Shacharis, daven Gishmak, I'll daven better. Anyway, that was the thing. So what we see, it's a very interesting thing that we see two things. First of all, that the way that you give the pan has a very big element of the way you go to Yechidus. And secondly, we see there was a difference in the way different kinds of pidyonis, you just didn't even have to be read. It was just put down at the oil. And but the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted, there was a whole different sug, the pan that he had, he wanted him to actually read it there. If we take a look for Gimmel Tammuz, in the way that the Rebbe describes writing a pidyon in Tafshin Yud, the first, in Tafshin Yud Aleph. This is the first time that was Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the Rebbe writes a letter, is printed in L'Kutei Sichos, in Chelik Yud Aleph, it's printed in other places as well. And there the Rebbe writes like this about a pan. After davening Shacharis on the day of the Yom Hilula, which will be Gimmel Tammuz, and after we chazer the Maimer, then it was Basar Lagani, now we'll have the Maimer for Nafri Gimmel Tammuz. Yikid kolechet pidyon nefesh, everyone should read their pan. Kimuvan, b'chagiras abneit, understandably, you have to wear a gatlan. Elu shezach li'karnas li'yechidus, and those who had the schus to be in Yechidus with the Frierdiker Rebbe that I was writing, Ayal kol panim, lidas hespnei, kektushas mechad mur, hakam, those who had the schus at least to see, if not in Yechidus, to see the Frierdiker Rebbe, yitzayir atzmei, he should picture in his mind as if he is basically a sapan, when he is going to read his pan that he wrote, he should visualize himself kilo embelefan, as if he's standing before the Rebbe and reading his pan. Which means that you should it's not just a question of writing words and putting it in the aisle, but that when you read the pan, you have to read the pan before you send it. You have to read the pan and feel as if you're then standing in Yechidus. The Rebbe writes, those who saw the Frierdiker Rebbe, those who when Yechidus especially. Now for us nowadays, it's a lot easier because we have the Rebbe's pictures all over, and even those who didn't have the schus to be in Yechidus or to see, but you could see the Rebbe, the picture, and we should be able to try to feel as if we're standing in Yechidus, standing before the Rebbe, and we read it, and then after we finish reading the pan that we wrote, Laniach hapan achakach in daf maimer, we put the pan into the pages of a maimer of the Rebbe. Kunteris could be a sikh of the Rebbe. So in other words, that we're putting it in because this is where the Rebbe is in his Torah, and we put it in there. Shall Torah, okay. And l'shalche b'mefshiri bebayim, we should send it, and if possible on that very same day, amnash l'kreis alatzin shall be read there. I have to say that it's interestingly, that in the original text of the Rebbe's letter, it was a slightly different here. It was written like this: Laniach hapan achakach bein dafei hamaimer v'kuntres v'chulu shel teiras from the Frierdiker Rebbe. And then the Rebbe had written originally ve'im be'efshiri, and if possible, l'shalchei bayim, to send it that day to be read at the Tzion. The Rebbe later, this was the original text. I have a copy of the letter that the Rebbe sent to my father. And there, the Rebbe made he made a, I don't know if I could show this. It could be seen. You could see over here. The Rebbe went with a pen, like up and down around the words, and he says, instead of it's saying Vim Bavshiri L'Shalchai, Vim Bavshiri L'Shalchai Be'Briyim, the Rebbe put first the words the way it's now printed in Likutei Sichos and Chelik Yudalef. L'Shalchai, he added the vav L'Shalchai, and he took out the vav Im Bavshiri L'Shalchai, and then he put in, and here he says Im Bavshiri Be'Bayim, and in the printed edition there's a further correction where the Rebbe puts the words Im Bavshiri in parentheses. So what that means, it means that not to think that if you can't, the way it was originally, someone might misread it and think that only if it's possible do you send it at all, because it said, so what happens if you can't? Then you don't send it. No, the Rebbe says that you send it, and if possible, on that very same day. And we know that sending a pan, the very moment that you send the pan, it's already there's stories about the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe said it many times. As soon as you send it, it's already Agatan. I personally had an experience like that when I was in the first course of going to Australia in Chav Zayin. That was, I think it was Chav Zayin or Chav Ches. Anyway, I wrote a pan. I sent to the Rebbe of my Yom Huledes, which is several days after Purim, and I dropped it in the mailbox in Australia. On Purim day, late afternoon, just before the end of the day. And on Purim, of course, there's hours difference between Australia's ahead of in time than New York, but still, till the letter would get there, and those times especially was a long time. But my father went on the Purim Fabrengen. He went up to the Rebbe to say, Chaim, ask a bracha from me for the Yom Huledes, and the Rebbe said that Mishen Gishrim. So we know that as soon as you send it, it's like already Agitan. At any rate, but this is, the Rebbe says that the way that it's important, the reading, the whole process, not only the writing, but the reading especially has to be done. The Rebbe doesn't say that the writing of it has to be done on the day of the Yom Ha'Lul, but he says that you have to read it in the morning, after the Maimer, and with the Gartel, and be mitzayed, as if you're standing before the Rebbe, and you're reading what you wrote, and then to send it. So, and we're mitzayed in your mind. So this is an important thing because it has a likeness, a similarity to Yechidus. When it comes to Yechidus, we know that Yechidus has some very special points. There is, in Hayom Yom, there is several things that we find about Yechidus and that are important to know. In Hayom Yom on Yud Elul, it says that the elder Chassidim, the great elder Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, would say that the word Yechidus, based on different places in Mishnayos, has three translations. It means Perushay Klur, to clarify your situation, because when you go into Yechidus, people are mevulbel, they don't know where they're holding, everything becomes clear. Abgestellt, which means to be kavea, to determine a seder of what a person has to do further. And the third thing is vereinzigt. Vereinzigt means to, as we say, the lashon is kashrus, and as he says there that in the Hitachos of Zeis HaMeretz, the inyan of Yechidus is l'varer esat es matzavei, to clarify his situation where he's holding. The kiveya efen avidosei, to determine how he's going to go further in his avodah sumira ulakado samidas tevis. And then the third thing is l'eskashir bis achdus gemura, to be connected to the Rebbe with total oneness. And what does that mean? And the Rebbe explains there, and Hayom Yom is explained, v'limsed atzmei, to give over himself, übergeben sich, devote himself, with alle desenes, all self-interest, self-wants, all these things put aside, to give yourself over to the Rebbe, say, I'm yours, and ready to do whatever the Rebbe wants, whatever the Rebbe's nachas, whatever the Rebbe's is, no matter what. So this is what it means. We could look for all kinds of things, but this is the simple meaning, as he explains here. The word is kashrus, means to be devoted and give over all your detzainus to do what the Rebbe wants. So this is important for everyone, especially important for a shliach to know this is the basis. And to be able to do that, obviously you need preparation. It doesn't just happen, because we're all involved in our own messy lives. We're involved in all kinds of things. And so we also find in Hayom Yom another thing about a Yechidus, that it's like when you salt meat for kashering meat, there's a three-pronged process in it. First, you have to have shria, you have to vacance it, you have to take the meat and has to soak. You have to soak the meat to be able to make it softer and be able to have the salt penetrate. Then you salt it, and that takes out the blood, takes out the part that's unwanted, and that leaves the part that is wanted. And then the third thing is that you have to then rinse it. And he goes on and says like this: what does that mean in Yechidus Navedas Hashem? Shria means that you veikim sich in divrei harav. You immerse yourself in the words of the Rebbe, his Maimorim, Siches. You're totally immersed in it. That's preparation one. Then after that comes the Yechidus. That's the Melicha, where with the Rebbe's guidance, you separate yourself from what's not right and you put yourself on the right track. And then Hadacha means to rinse it off, to make yourself ready. And that means after the Yechidus, to be kelet everything, and that comes to a Niggin. A Niggin, Chassidish Niggin. I remember once there was Fabrengen in Bekesha with Chavdala Teves, the Yemlul of the Alter Rebbe. And I remember we sang at the Fabrengen, everyone sang a Niggin of the Alter Rebbe. And the Rebbe said that with Ersh the Langt a pan to Malten Rebbe, whereas the Niggin is a chelik of the pan. So the Niggin is an important part of this. Anyway, so that is some of the things we have in Hayom Yom. And then we have an interesting thing we have in Hayom Yom as far as it goes in preparation for a Yechidus and a pan to a certain level. So this is from the Friedrich Rebbe, and it says like this in Tafresh Prevov. It's very strong words. Hapidyan on tshuva. If you give a pan without tshuva, well, vert nit niskabel. It's not accepted. I don't know, maybe it means on a higher level. Umilentes nit. It's not read. Und es macht noch kale, and it even makes things worse. So of course it means many different levels. I mean, obviously it doesn't mean that we have to have at least a very basic tshuva, meaning to try to when you give a pan, we ask the Rebbe for something, we have to be able to give our tshuva means to come back, put ourselves, give ourselves, devote ourselves to do what the Rebbe wants of us, at least a basic feeling, an important feeling. There's also, of course, on the highest extreme, we find in Hayom Yom, where it speaks about a chassid prepared himself and brought the Yechidus, or the connection, to be a pan too, with the Rebbe in a very deep level. And it says there that the Alter Rebbe had gesagt that Ramesha Belenket was one of the greatest chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe said about him, Moshe hat mechen de gadlus. He has a very great intellect. And in the 10 years, in the 10 years that he worked hard, he worked out that he had mechen rechavim, very broad intellect. So what does it mean? How did he work 10 years? He worked 10 years to prepare himself to go into Yechidus with Alter Rebbe, and then he worked 7 years afterwards to bring what he got in Yechidus, the Pel in his life. This is, of course, the greatest chassidim. We're not on that level, but just to know that whatever it is, even on our small level, we have to realize that we have to not just write a pan, but prepare ourselves and take the moment very, very seriously. And here is also something found in Sefer Minhagim, and it's page 86 in Sefer Minhagim. It says that the Rebbe Rashab said, it's certain that in the Yemei Hilula, the Rebbeim are Me'eri Rachmim. They awaken Hashem's compassion, Afal Chassidim, for all Chassidim, for their Weiber and Kinder, for their wives, their children, for everyone. The Rebbe on his Yom Hilula is Me'eri Rachmim for all Chassidim and for all the families. Avidos is Nor HaSedus Rachmim Klos. That's the general kind of Sedus Rachamim. Avidich Chassidim, B'Chazen and Kavea B'Yom Hilula Alimut, the Chassidim Shvabrengen. The Chassidim not just depend on it to happen from above, but they is set aside, the Yom Elul, to be a day of learning, learning especially the Rebbe's Teres, and have a Chassidish Verbringen. Das is der Pidyon Nefesh, was Chassidim the lang in the Bal Elul. So that's a spiritual pan, and obviously that's also part of the pan. When we give a pan, we write our names, we also have to ourselves. So spending the day also, he says, with learning the Torah of the Rebbe, and having Chassidish Verbringen and singing Nigun, all these things are part of what brings it b'peil. Now, there's something more I'd like to speak about when it comes to a pan. We have to speak about that when it comes to going to Yechidus and to writing a pan, to being close to the Rebbe. One of the important and basic things for us to know is that at that moment, all pitchkes, all chitzenis, all external things are nothing. We stand before the Rebbe, we stand with emes. This is the one place that everything is truth. I mean, both on the simplest level, which means that what we think we have inside of our minds, inside of our hearts, the Rebbe sees right through us. We know that. We know, all of us, the Shluchim know, when we got the Maimed V'Shavti V'Sholem, the Rebbe gave it to all Shluchim. The Rebbe didn't say anything. He gave it to each of us. We came up on the platform the Rebbe was standing, and he looked at us. I remember the Rebbe, other people told me the same feeling. You felt like you're being x-rayed through and through, just quiet, and with the Rebbe's eyes, penetrating eyes, he looked right through you, and it was shashtil. For me, it felt like who knows how long. It was actually just very shortly, but it was an experience that shook us to the core. But in general, I mean, that's not what a Rebbe is, much more than that, but this is just in a simple level. And we know, an example, my father told me that once there was a bunch of Bachim, he was there, he was standing around the Frierdiker Rebbe, and Frierdiker Rebbe asked that, he said, he begged that, please, you're standing here, please be more careful about what you're thinking, which means he told them openly that he senses their thoughts, and someone had some thoughts that he felt uncomfortable with. There's many stories like that. My Zayda, Rebbe Sol Jacobson, told me that the Rebbe Rashab said, it's not a big thing to be a der machshavas, to sense someone else's thoughts. He says if you have a zichach hamachshav, if your mind is pure, so it's like a mirror. It's clapped up. It reflects the thoughts of everyone around you, and that's even when something is when the Rebbe is right there. But even when we're not there in front of the Rebbe, even this story is a famous story about Rabbi Mendel Futterfass, who. I heard it from him when he first came out of Russia. He came to 770. He was standing at our table, we learned, and he told the story later. It's printed. People know the story about the way he was in Russia, and it was very difficult for him. And he wanted to write a pandan to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he couldn't. So he thought in his mind, he imagined standing before the Frierdiker Rebbe writing a pan. And when he came out much later, this was years and years later. So in England, he found out from his family, his wife had received a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and it said, in answer to your mivrak, to the telegram that you sent, and they wondered how could he send a telegram? He was deep in Russia and tortured in prison, and they realized that the mivrak was the thought. So that's for certain that the Rebbe reads thoughts, but that's not all. A Rebbe is a Rebbe. The Rebbe means that he sees into our neshama, into the pneumius of the neshama, into the atzma neshama, and all superficial things are nothing. And when we stand, we write a pan, we have to feel that it's time to shed away all the nadishkeit and all the emptiness. And this is the point where we face the emes lamite. We say that Yechidus is also putting together Yechid of the neshama, together the Rebbe is the Yechid of all Yidden. But when you know it, on Nilav Yom Kippur, the person that Yid is supposed to be with emes and all the outside layers of the neshama fall away are not important. So when you write a pan and Yechidus, that's a moment that a chassid can't stand. You have to feel that it touches you very, very deeply. So this is, and then I wanted to speak a little bit about some more details of how we write a pan. Now, when we write a pan, years ago, what was very much common was that people would write a pan with the words like this. People would write Ana la'er rachmim b'rabim, Meked harachmim v'asliches, Meked rachmim v'achsad, whatever it is, and they would write then of Meked hasliches v'achsad ma'mitim al derech machnise rachmim k'mevur b'tshuvas mariusa, which means that people wrote because there was people who argued that it's not proper to write a pan to somebody who is not Nelam Haza Begashmis, to write on a kaver, to write a pan. So they would quote from Mari Bruna, who was one of the famous early Achrenim, and he writes that it's okay, just like we say in the Sliches, Machnise Rachmim. We know that Tzemach Tzedek has a bit about this in Derech Mitzvah Secha. We say Machnise Rachmim, and we're not Chas V'Shalom speaking to the Malachim, asking them to give us something. We're asking them to be our shliach das leibishter. The Tzemach Tzedek brings this al derech there also, and of course by a Rebbe there's much more reason, because there's some sefer that everyone's quoted as well. There's some sefer says that a Rebbe is not. It's like Chassidim are all like one muhus, and the Rebbe is a mutzam mechabin, not a mafsik, whatever it is. So the Rebbe writes about, and then there's also a long tshuva of Minchas Alazit. I think it's Samaches, where he writes about all the Mekedus and Chazal for writing panim. But the bottom line is the Rebbe says that all this, he says, if I would have the Koach that Rebbe writes, he would mevatel this whole nusach. He says to write, and then in a pan you're writing to the Rebbe. You're not writing, it's not a place to write in for a shalos teshuvos about what the heter it is, or why you should be allowed, or whatever it is. This is not the place for it. So that for sure is mevatel. And then the Rebbe says, even the words, he would also be mevatel, because he says, what do you have to give the Rebbe an address that he should be Meir Rachmim from Moked Harachmim? Maybe the Rebbe wants to go higher than Moked Harachmim. Wherever he wants to go, it's not our business. So this is what the Rebbe said. And from then on, Chassidim stopped writing Moked Harachmim, even though we have the text that the Rebbe himself wrote when he wrote a pan. And if you look in Eitzid Menhagim from Munshine, look at the end of the Sefer, you could find there is a text of the Rebbe's own panim. And the Rebbe writes also, he doesn't write this whole thing about Shuvas Mariva, because told the Rebbe was not good as the Gamri. But he wrote, for whatever reason, but the Rebbe writes here and says in the Sichet, even though the Friedrich Rebbe did write from Moked Harachmim, but he says that was for the Friedrich Rebbe, we don't have to copy him. We're writing to the Rebbe, let him choose where he wants. And so the fact that the Rebbe wrote in his own pan, in Moked Harachmim, when he wrote to the Friedrich Rebbe, we see clear the Rebbe is saying that's the Rebbe Shesach, if he wants to write Moked Harachmim, but we have to go, we need sometimes higher than Moked Harachmim, and let the Rebbe decide what to write, so we don't write that. Furthermore, in the text that you write after that, so people would write, the standard thing is avur, avuri, avurdem, adriyanim, and that's where I was taught too. But interesting, we see that the Rebbe writes not the word avur, but the word olai, for me. And actually, al pi diktuk, it seems there's a big difference, because the Rebbe is me'er rachmim, you're me'er rachmim on someone. Avur means where there's an intermediary, somebody else. So actually, I see here it's quoted in from Ginsburg, he has in his Minhagim, from Lev Groner, that he said that when you're asking for yourself, you write olai, but if you're asking for someone else, another yid, then you say avur, because then you're asking for somebody else. But actually, it's very, if we take a look at the Rebbe's own nusach in his own panim, we see that he writes also, not just for himself, but also for others, he uses the same word al. He writes, and he writes olai, and he writes his name, and then he writes also al this person, and he mentions different kinds of people, and he writes al by all of them. So we don't have to ask for the Rebbe to kind of be asking, like someone asking for another party. The Rebbe asks directly, and it's clear from the Rebbe we should use the word olai, and al for whoever we're asking for. Furthermore, I've seen that some people write later rachmim rabim al naran chayshali, on nefesh ruach neshama chayechidashali. The Rebbe doesn't write such words. Could be the word chassidim, that were ruchnistic chassidim, they were interested in all these things. We need not just for our neshama things, but also our guf things and for everything. And in fact, it's interesting. The Rebbe's pan himself also asks for parnasa and everything. The Rebbe asks for everything, both beduchnis and mekashmis. So the thing is that the less we try to eisfein and to try to we're not to tinker and to make it fancier and to make it more ruchnis, it's just plain. We have to write. In fact, the Rebbe wrote like that, just plain. And furthermore, some people write that at the end of the zettel of the pan, you should write hamatir. There was Betzach, the one who was begging and you write your name. The Rebbe did not do that. He wrote his name at the end too, but he did not use the word hamatir. You don't write about yourself. You're writing what you want the Rebbe to write. So this is some things that we could learn from the nusach, from the text that we have here. Then there's also some other interesting things that we have, and that is that the Rebbe Rashab writes that when you write a pan, in Yonim Ruchnim, he says, don't write chisrenes about yourself. You only write that about the positive side. You write that this need, you'd like a bracha, this thing should become better. You don't write about the bad. And actually, we find this also in the Rebbe's letters that the Rebbe wrote. We find very much a similar kind of thing. The Rebbe writes, for an example, there's a letter you have in Igres, in Krach Dalit, in page Samach, page Shimem Ches. So there he says that the Rebbe writes, someone is writing to him a pan, and he says that, the Rebbe writes, it's very difficult for me, this pan as is, because you write that he's writing to a chassid that he said that if my son has to suffer chas v'shalom yisurim, I ask that I should be in his place. The Rebbe says this is not a way to write, it's not proper, that you're asking later rachmim b'rabim, which means that the yisurim will go away. So why are you going to have a cheshbon that someone have to be in exchange, someone should have to suffer this way, suffer that way? He says he asked the Rebbe could do it any way, he could be made rachmim, whether it's al pi teva, shalom aleichem teva, whatever the Rebbe wants, he'll find a way to do it, and just rely on the Rebbe, don't make any cheshbonis. Then you have also, someone writes a pan that he should read to the Rebbe, that he should bring it to the Frierdiker Rebbe's ale, and he says that the Rebbe says, I can't read it the way you wrote it, because he wrote about people that you have problems from, so the Rebbe says, of the roof daftir das nutzen, he says that you have to use a pan to write that someone should be destroyed, chas v'sholem. So the roof soll the Frierdiker Rebbe sich abreißen von Gan Eden und wegen im Besen shalom aleichem beten, this and this gewalt, all the Rebbe writes. So in other words, writing negative things is out of the question. And the Rebbe says, in general, I mean, the thing is that there's also, the Rebbe writes that when you have a chesaron from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that a chesaron that a person has, when you write in a pan, you don't emphasize a chesaron because in Ruchnius, when you write in a pan, everything becomes alive. And the chesaron that you write becomes a living thing. So a person should always focus on what you're asking a bracha for, what you want. You say it's rachmim, and think positive, and the Rebbe will beten and eis beten, and we'll have everything v'rachmim v'rabim, and with Kenadis again from the years ago the Rebbe said, it's a chesher kaf m'chupel. We right now, that the sof from Golas right nach tunkel nach mer und mer. So if then was a chesher kaf m'chupel, the world is now in a big chesher, but hopefully we're going to come right out, and the Rebbe will give them, the Rebbe will made rachmim sein, with all that is from Nal and Yonim to the Gula Kreva.